Hello and welcome to the Ken Sealing Waterloo Region Museum's virtual field trip. Although we're all stuck at home right now, once upon a time we did travel quite a bit. We would take buses and get drives to school. Maybe we would walk or bike to get to our classes. Either way, we've always been a people on the go. And it could be taking the Ion, it could be something as simple as taking a bus or taking a car like the one you see right here. This car was actually made in Cambridge 30 years ago. But believe it or not, it wasn't the very first car. We also had cars being produced 120 years ago. We had the Good brothers making the Leroy. We had the Kennedy and the Redpath motor car. We even had the Galt Motor Company making a hybrid 100 years ago, where they used kerosene to power a generator that was quite efficient. The only problem was the car could only go 50 kilometers an hour, and gasoline was so cheap that the idea never really caught on. These early cars, though, changed how people lived their lives. They created more options and opportunity for people. So people were no longer forced to work at the factory closest to them, shop at the closest store. They now had opportunities to move into suburbs. Now, these suburbs 100 years ago aren't what we would call suburbs today because they were just outside the downtown core. And for many of us, we would consider those very first suburbs to be part of the downtown centers today. Now, these cars also created the idea that we could drive around for leisure. So you can see pictures of people traveling about, taking a Sunday afternoon to go for a picnic, and hey, maybe they'll even get some souvenirs like fungus along the way. We have these local pieces of fungus here that people had written down their trips that they were taking. Now, cars 100 years ago weren't nearly as common as they are today, and that's because cars were quite expensive when they first came out. It wasn't until they created the auto assembly line that cars were something that people could afford on an everyday basis. This also helped to fuel new industries and the idea that people should move into suburbs. These suburbs, or these cars, created the idea that suburbs were needed. People now needed places to park their cars, so they needed driveways and garages. They also needed more space to spread out. And by moving out of these noisy downtown cores, people could do that. They could have newer houses with nicer amenities. Now, cars weren't the only early form of transportation. We also had streetcars and trolley cars that would help people to move around. We had a trolley car that connected Galt, Preston, and Hespeler, and we had another line that connected Waterloo and Kitchener. Now, these trolley cars created more options for people. It also helped people to move into suburbs. They could now live somewhere and work somewhere different. They could pick which factories they wanted to work at based on the type of work, the working conditions, and the pay that they would receive for working there. Trolley cars also fueled the idea that people could go out and have fun. So you'd find parks and recreation areas all along the routes. So you could go canoeing, bowling, you might even go to a dance hall that you would find around there. Now, these trolley cars are kind of like the modern day Ions we still see around here. These Ions were able to bring more people together to travel much more easily. And what I want you to do for me for a moment is imagine how life would change if we had no cars, no Ions, and no other forms of transportation. You can use a bike, or you can use walking to get around. How would that impact your life? What would your travel be like? I want you to make some statements that say, if this happened, then this would be the impact, so I would have to do this. I'm going to call those the if, then, so statements. If I had to walk everywhere, then I would have to get groceries that I could carry on my back. So I would have to go grocery shopping more often. See what other sentences you can think of that are if, then, so, to figure out how walking and biking would impact your life. Thanks for joining me.